One of the things that we like to do here when we have a group of experts both around the physical table and joining us virtually online is we like to talk about some of the pressing matters that are in the industry right now. And when it comes to wireless, there's a ton of them. Let's go ahead and kind of open up this roundtable. We need to talk about what's going on today and the challenges that we face. And if anybody out there has tried to go buy a new wireless device recently, you probably know why. Wi-Fi 6 is the thing, right? Unless it's 6E. Wait, is it 6E release 2 now? No, just 6 release 2. But Wi-Fi 7 is coming too. So you can see how confusing it can be to people who don't know what's going on. And all of that comes down to a couple of things that we want to talk about. First one is security. How do we do security? That's the problem I was troubleshooting this morning. Turns out that when you try to do a PSK, it works great until you have a device that is capable of doing 802.11ax, trying to join it, and it failed. And then I had to do some stuff around SAE and other things and basically put it into compatibility mode. You guys know compatibility mode, something about dragons and blood. There was a thing that we did about that one time. So I want to kind of open the floor up here because I actually know that John's going to jump all over this topic. What are some of the security challenges that we're seeing with the adoption of new Wi-Fi? Because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but hackers are everywhere. They can take my data and they can just snatch it out of the air like with, a fly with chopsticks. So what are some challenges that people are facing? Because I'll tell you, I was stumped by that problem until I figured out that it was affecting everybody. And then I got in and started digging around.
I would say that just coming out of the other side of an ETLS deployment, the biggest problem in my world is not the Wi-Fi, it's the clients. Configuring clients, pushing out policies, getting them enrolled into a PKI is still stunningly difficult. Some operating systems are easier than others, but the biggest challenge is not what my infrastructure can do, it's what can my clients do. And that's going to be the issue going forward. When I inquired with my client engineering team about turning on WPA3, their answer is, well, we're going to need to test our driver versions. We're going to need to test our fleet to tell you if we're ready for that or if you're going to break something. So I think the biggest problem is that the infrastructure is mostly there, but the clients just aren't.
Yeah, so the clients, from the security perspective, everything John said, but if you zoom out, it's not just security. The clients are a royal mess when you look across the board. Security is just one example. We have this raging gap chasm between consumer and enterprise. We have consumer things that get dragged into the enterprise that will never be able to do enterprise security type stuff. We've got all these great Wi-Fi alliance certifications that cover everything but keeping the clients in some kind of decent order. Just a whole range of problems related to clients that you typically don't see in other access protocols. And we need to reform the client space. It's never going to happen, but we need to.
So Lee, let me actually jump on that point because that's a really good kind of overview for people who may not be aware. So a lot of the standards that are proposed by the Wi-Fi Alliance and many others. And the idea is that we all play on the same level playing field, right? We've had the IEEE and the IETF for a number of years that have defined protocols and standards, and they say that things must work like that. And if you don't adhere to those standards, then you can't say that you're BGP or 802.11g or whatever. But what's different about the Wi-Fi Alliance? I know the answer. I know there's one very specific answer as to why clients cannot operate in the standard, but I'm curious as to you guys. What do you see as the problem?
The problem?
With clients. How can you produce a client that doesn't meet the standards?
Because the standards are not law. The standards are just the spec for how this is supposed to work. The Wi-Fi Alliance is I think of them more as a marketing group, but a group of industry companies that got together to say, well, what are the things that we care about? And then they'll do specifications for that. But again, it's not the law. So that means, Apple, I don't even know if today they're still Wi-Fi certified. Now they support, as far as I know, they support, the R, K, V, they do 802.1x. They actually have really good functionality, but they're not certified. So being certified just means you met a minimum level of requirements that the group said you have to pass in order to get this sticker on your box, but it doesn't mean that you have to. So number one, you have a limited subset that they say you need to meet to get the sticker on your box. And then number two, you have devices that don't even have to meet that because you can still sell them and not be, people will buy them because they're less expensive or they're pretty or whatever. And so because of that, because we have no true standardized way to say, in order for this device to function, it has to support and do these things in this way. And the device is what's making those decisions, not the infrastructure, because that's how it's been since day one. That's where the crux is. It's at the device end because we have no way to tell manufacturers this is what you need to do. And on the financial side, for selling equipment and stuff, I guess that makes sense. You don't want to make it too hard, but at the same time, it makes it difficult for people who are working in the enterprise because you have no standardized way of defining how things should work in this environment. And so you're stuck doing things like testing and validating and how does this device work as opposed to this model from this vendor to make decisions, if you're even doing that, which a lot of people, maybe most people, don't do. So that's my 2 cents on why that occurs.
I mean, he's right. There's no reason why a manufacturer has to listen to the standard as long as the thing is interoperable with the AP. Who cares what I support? I'm going to support the bare minimum functionality necessary because that's all I want to build into my device. And that's the altruistic kind of looking at it with the rosy colored glasses. What if it was something a little more nefarious of, I think that your standards are crap and I'm going to try to get you to use my own version of this protocol because I think I did it better and it makes my client stickier. So the only way that your device will be able to use high bandwidth audio codecs and better video feeds is to talk to my Wi-Fi router that I sell that is not 100% standards based because I added a whole bunch of extra stuff in it. I'm not saying the Sith Lord version of that is the way that everybody does it, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody did.
Well, there's actually
Okay.
there's a pervasive problem with that industry-wide that I think we kind of address in the administrator level quite often and then sort of ignore it, right? Everyone who had to look at a spec and knows basically what a non-802.11 video camera looks like. Or good luck if they're using a quote-unquote cordless phone. Like, thank God that cellular is as good as it is now and Wi-Fi calling is, well, somewhat functional. Because I've never seen anything quite annihilate, besides microwave, a whole spectral space at 2.4 like a non-802.11 phone. It's absurd. And
Well-
most of the time when I see something wonky, that's what it ends up being.
Let's let Lee jump in and then I'll let you get to it, John. Lee, what were you going to say?
Well, you used the word nefarious. I mean, I am a conspiracy theorist in a lot of directions, and I kind of wouldn't be surprised if, major vendors in the wireless industry like the disarray and like they have no incentive to, show up to the Wi-Fi Alliance and say, if we just said that, define something that is, this is strictly consumer, this is strictly enterprise, these are some pretty easy criteria. And if you want a sticker to work in the enterprise, you need to do this. I think if you wanted to do that, it would be fairly easy for the industry and the alliance to pull together and do. I think the major vendors like the disarray because it lets them sell more products that address the disarray. It gives them a whole new product line. Hey, I can sell you something, some very expensive, highly licensed magic in the middle that will make Bonjour work or make whatever work. So, I mean, that's, I think people are talking to people in back rooms and saying, don't fix that because it gives us products to sell. And that's just my, again, my conspiracy theory hat being worn.
John?
I was just going to rant a little bit more because you mentioned Wi-Fi calling, and I got triggered. We had a building where the DAS was not online yet, and so we told folks the workaround because it was a giant cellular dead zone. Use Wi-Fi calling, but of course the problem is people would get up and move, and that was a problem for Wi-Fi calling. Why? Because 11R was not turned on the enterprise SSID. Why? Because not all of our clients play nice with it, and some of them freak out when they see it. And so it all gets back for me, so much of my problems get back to the clients. So now I have an SSID for mobile devices. It has 11R turned on, and it's just, if the clients would, how long did we wait for these things? You know, those, a lot of Mac fans in the wireless environment, we couldn't get them to do KVNR, and it only happened, in my opinion, because the M1, the Apple Silicon devices use the same system boards and chips as the iOS devices, and they already had that written for the iOS stack, and so they finally just, you know, control pasted the code. They weren't going to do it for Intel. It's just very frustrating that they don't seem to want to implement the features of the protocol that make Wi-Fi better.
So let me put on my curmudgeon hat for a while, if you're here for just a moment, because as everyone knows, I am the networking nerd, not the 802.11 nerd. And I've heard all of this before. I really have. You can replace clients with application developers. And let me give you a story. My application does not know what to do when the gateway disappears. And I'm not going to tell my application to re-ARP for a new gateway MAC address. Fix it in software because I'm too important to fix my software. You guys need to come up with all of these crazy workarounds because I am unwilling to fix things. And we, GLBP, HSRP, any kind of next hop reachability protocol only exists because applications are stupid. VMware built an entire industry on vMotion because machines didn't want to have to change their IP when they moved across a data center. Anybody that's ever tried to develop like that data center survivability thing knows what I'm talking about. Do you know what fixed it? The cloud. Because Amazon was like, we are not implementing any kind of next hop reachability protocol. You need to write an application that knows that when the data center goes down in Reston, you need to move to Corvallis and everything just keeps on working. And it turns out that when you cut everybody off and stop fixing things that should have been fixed by somebody else a long time ago, they actually fixed them. So what's to stop the major Wi-Fi manufacturers, the Mists and the Ciscos and the Extremes and the Ubiquities of the world from just saying, oh, you don't meet the standard, we won't allow you to connect until you do. You have to support the following protocols at a minimum, or we will not allow you to connect to an enterprise AP. And if you don't like that, well, I'm sorry that you just went out and bought a new iPhone 14 Pro. Maybe you need to talk to your manufacturer about why you can't use this in an environment.
Customers dictate how it's going to go. And if you, I'm sure Peter can, agree to this, but the retail sector, they like to bleed something to absolute death, right? Mm-hmm. So past end of software maintenance, past end of life, that thing still needs to work. So then as the Wi-Fi enhances and we get new software and new models and new features, we still have to cater for the old things. As soon as you pick up a gun and tell the customer, you will do this or you will do that, they say, goodbye, we'll choose somebody who will meet our every need. And then we've got to find creative ways to get around that.
He's just stated Wi-Fi's greatest strength and weakness. They're the same thing. It's backwards compatibility. On the one hand, I can show up with a BGN, you know, a BG only device and still connect it to my enterprise network. It will still work. And yet my network is in a lot of ways held back by the fact that I can still support that device. Now I can turn things off, I know, and I can tweak things to not support it. But the protocol's backwards compatibility is the source of a lot of problems.
So you want to talk about backwards compatibility in a protocol? Let me introduce you to my Lord and Savior, Ethernet. Here's the thing though, we may call it Ethernet, but Bob Metcalf's Ethernet is not my Ethernet today. Anybody in here have a 10 gig NIC on their device? Anybody in here have a 10, 100, 1000, 10,000 NIC on their device? They're actually fairly rare because most people who have a 10 gig NIC don't support 10, 100, 1000, and 10,000. They only support 10 gig because backwards compatibility on those things is a really stupid idea. So why do we allow them to get away with it? Shannon, I totally understand where you're coming from. Customers are going to run that thing until it falls apart. Anybody who has an old Toyota Corolla will agree. You can drive those things until they fall apart, then you can paste the parts back on with duct tape and they'll still keep going. The question is, why do we put up with it?
Well, we have no choice, right? So, a budget plays an important role too. We have a customer, for example, and again, kind of back to Shannon's point, they are, for example, have an RFP out and they're looking to refresh their clients, and vendor X gives them clients with crappy NICs, WLAN cards, and it's, let's say, $500. And when vendor Y is selling something that's has a really nice on cards, and it's works, and it's, let's say, $1,000. I mean, obviously they're going to go with the $500 because if they're buying in large quantities, I mean, that makes a huge difference. In that case, well, now you're stuck with it, because now if you're a service provider or MSP or anything like that, you kind of have to make that work for that customer.
But I think we have entered a new stage in Wi-Fi, though, in the last decade that we have not had before, and that is AX. And what I mean by that is AC 2013, AX 2021. That's 8 years difference between that? That's longer than we've had between any other standard. Now is the time for the Wi-Fi Alliance to start saying you have to support all these features that make enterprise work, whatever your device is, because like he said, we can disable features if we have old devices, right? Now, yeah, we all have customers and we all, that maybe have really old devices, and we can account for those. But any new device it should just say, forget it. From now on, you're going to support, and 6 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz devices, 100%. That's a total greenfield opportunity to start from the very beginning and say, support everything. Otherwise, you don't get the little stick.
But for everything else, I mean, it's a crucial thing is what you mentioned, like Wi-Fi Alliance. If Wi-Fi, everyone has to kind of buy into that, and everyone has to do it. Because if one vendor decides or 2 vendors decide they don't want to do it,
what's to stop the largest handset mobile device vendor from choosing not to do that? How many of you guys are still running Cisco PoE on your systems? You all know that Cisco developed PoE, and then the entire industry said, we're going to do it differently because we hate you. And that's why you have 802.3, AF, AT, all of the other ones. I'm not saying that people will gang up on somebody they don't like, but I'm saying people will gang up on somebody they don't like, especially if that person's like, you know what, we're just not going to support it. Because we can. Because we have 627 billion reasons in $1 bills to say we don't have to support that at all.
Is it ganging up, or is it we don't want to pay your licensing fee and so we're going to develop an open standard?
DisplayPort what? Yeah, no, there's a lot to that. The joke is that DisplayPort is HDMI without the licensing fee. And the connector's a little bit different for that reason. But you're right. I mean, what's to stop a company from taking something, patenting it, and saying you must use ours, and if you don't want to use ours and you don't want to pay for it, then we're just not going to give you that support. That's why we have standards bodies. That's why we have the IEEE, who is very rigorous, and you must do it like this, and if you don't, you are wrong. And then you have the IETF, which is a lot more like the Wi-Fi Alliance, which if you don't know, their consensus is no kings, just rough consensus and running code, and a lot of arguing. And anyone who's ever been in an IETF meeting knows how that goes sometimes. So here's the ultimate bottom line question. Can we solve this problem with the Wi-Fi Alliance as it exists today, or do we need to modify the Wi-Fi Alliance so that they have teeth, so that they can force people to do things the right way? And if you don't modify it, I mean, think about UL listing, Underwriters Laboratories, right? You guys have seen that. You know that that's completely voluntary, right? You ever run a device that's not UL listed?
So I think it's that's a question. Can we solve this? And I think the answer is no. Not through the Wi-Fi Alliance or any other organisation. And I think it's because it's a far more complex problem than we're trying to. First of all, the Wi-Fi Alliance, a lot of Apple devices are not Wi-Fi certified.
Yeah.
They're a member of the Wi-Fi Alliance, but they don't certify their own devices. There's no. You look at IoT wireless devices, cards that go into washing machine, cookers, TVs, they're not Wi-Fi certified. They have no desire to be. It's going to add cost to a cheap chipset that people want to put into an IoT device. They're not even interested in becoming Wi-Fi certified. So if the Wi-Fi Alliance can have the most stringent rules, and a large set of devices wouldn't follow them anyway. And the other problem with the Wi-Fi Alliance is even if they went more stringent, at the moment, one of the big problems historically with the Wi-Fi Alliance was you just got Wi-Fi certified, and that could mean you supported 802.11b. Therefore, they tested that you supported B, and it could mean you supported AC. And then they introduced at least stickers that said Wi-Fi 5, 6. Now we're going to get 7, so at least there's some differentiation. But all that means is we've tested a certain number of things. And if you look at the tests, they're very, very simple. So you could still get today, you might go, okay, we want a Wi-Fi line, say everyone must support, let's just pick R, K, and V as 3 things. And they'll test that, I don't know, the APs that advertise R, K, and V information in their information elements, and the clients connect to their test AP. It doesn't mean that they test every single interworking of the 802.11 standard. And some of the elements of the standard are open to interpretation. So even if they said you need to support it, you'd still get client compatibility issues because people wouldn't implement those things the same way.
I want to
So
get,
it's not going to be solved.
I want to let
But
Lee
I
get in
can
here.
solve it. I can solve this. You simply, in an enterprise environment, you couple your Wi-Fi with a private 5G network. And for the services that you're talking about, where you want reliability of your client, these are the reasons why these two technologies can couple each other so well in the enterprise. That's the solution. You don't have to fix Wi-Fi. You don't have to make it look like cellular. You have an alternative solution.
Get out.
Just like you have other IoT solutions.
But there is
Absolutely. Yeah.
there is a
absolutely.
problem with that. There's a problem with that theory, though. If you look at the price of Wi-Fi these days, it's not getting cheaper. One enterprise AP out of the latest product set from any vendor is going to cost more than we used to pay for 10 packs just a few years ago. So the budget to get Wi-Fi and CBRS in big networks, I don't know that that's just it's easy to say, harder to do. But let me go back to the Wi-Fi Alliance just for a minute. And I know you want to talk about the future of Wi-Fi, and we're kind of talking about arguably what's been wrong up until today. But a couple of years ago, very nice gentleman in the C-suite at Extreme facilitated a conversation between the Wi-Fi Alliance, Keith Parsons, and myself. And we talked about all kinds of things and, where things are lacking as far as certification and what might be tested and this and that. The bottom line is you're going to pay to be in the Wi-Fi Alliance, and none of us want to pay to be in it for sure. So if you're not paying a lot of money, you don't get a voice. And the other thing I took away from that conversation is they don't really have anybody that is comparable to any of us. They don't have any client side, vendor side, Wi-Fi experts that are, saying, well, this is why that sucks. This is why maybe we ought to be doing something different. Our voice is not present in that organization, nor will it be, because none of us are going to pay whatever the ungodly price is to be part of that. And that lack of input is just going to, prevail as far as I can see, for what it's worth.
Well, and in terms of the Wi-Fi Alliance's ability to fix this problem, I try to picture what this process would look like, what certification would look like, and let's just take Windows laptops. You're going to have, it's two things. It's the hardware and it's the software. Are you going to be asking Intel to recertify every time they release a new code release? If they're moving and working in an agile, they don't do releases every 2 weeks, but if they got to an agile environment where literally every 2 weeks you were seeing driver updates, they're not going to recertify every 2 weeks. So the challenge is going to be that your certification is a snapshot of functionality in a point in time, and I don't want to discourage the vendors, the client vendors, from updating their software frequently as they find bugs.
Congratulations, John. You just gave me the one single reason why no one should ever move to an agile deployment methodology. There is no way in hell I am updating my drivers every week. Peter, go ahead.
So one thing which could be a way to at least help fix a situation, and I recorded a WLA podcast with some guys at Walmart. So this is sort of public information I'm saying, but internally in Walmart, they developed a client testing methodology to test clients. They've got a test environment. It looks like a store or warehouse type environment, and they run these every client device that the business wants to buy, and every phone, every tablet, they run it through that same self-test. So they'll be testing things like roaming, how well it connects, what sort of receiver sensitivity it is, and they come up with a scoring system. And then ultimately, These devices are either green because they're a good behaving Wi-Fi client, they're going to behave well on our networks. They have some amber ones and they have some red ones that you really don't want on your network. And it's sort of, you end up with this score from 1 to 10 and these different colors. What that allows them to do is that the business has found some devices which end up scoring red. They'll say, don't buy any more of these clients. Now, let's say, and I've talked to them a bit about this idea, and we would love to do it through maybe the Wireless Association, but which is finding resource to do it. Let's say you could come up with some sort of public testing of clients that did that, that companies could use to go, actually, this is a bad client. It's not going to perform well on our enterprise network. So as a business, we won't buy any of those. Now, would that name and shame clients to actually make sure they do implement and think about Wi-Fi, because actually it's going to infect their end line? I think that's potentially something you could do if you could get that organized. So effectively, there's an independent body which scores clients and gives them a score.
I would love that, Peter.
That would also be across the different vendors. So how does that device score against a Aruba running this code with that controller versus Cisco versus Juniper? Because the vendors will contest that big time.
Well,
Whatever gets presented.
Plus, it's a
there must be
controlled
that.
environment too. That's happening in a very controlled environment versus you bring the same exact client into a non-controlled environment. I mean, results.
So I want to let May get her point in, and then I want to kind of bring this home, because I think I see there's a point of contention that we need to fix, and someone on Twitter has referenced it. But May, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's a good idea to have an independent testing, and I know that with you and with the WLA we've discussed it, Peter. But you know, when it comes to, it feels like this debate is a catch-22. I mean, you know, who's going to look at the compatibility of the client? The guy that has to buy a laptop to go to the university, and he has to pick between this one and that one. He doesn't know anything about it, and you know, his choice is going to influence how much beer he can have at the pub tonight. I mean, I'm still gonna have to support his computer on my network, right?
I love the fact that we have a lot of these conversations going on, whether it's doing dual networks or whether it's doing a lot of testing like everybody brought up. But I want to reference something that Keith Miller said on Twitter. It doesn't matter how we fix this at an infrastructure level, as long as I still have to support this. As long as my executives walk in the day after these are released and say, make it work. Because I don't know if you realize this or not, but BYOD won. We no longer live in an environment, in a world where I can say we will only use MacBooks, we will only use ThinkPads. If you don't use either one of those devices that's been issued to you by corporate, you cannot join our wireless network. Too bad, so sad, go get something else. We now live in a world where it doesn't matter what we have to support it. Could you imagine if you had to support any form of data on your storage array? Could you imagine if you had to support any form of encryption transmitting data into the cloud? Maybe the problem is that we're too permissive with clients. Maybe the problem isn't the infrastructure. Maybe we need to stop solving that problem. And everyone always says, well, it's expensive to solve the problem. How expensive do you think it would be if suddenly no one could use an iPhone in the enterprise until they supported certain revs of protocols in their software stack? Do you think that people would put up with that? Why are you trying to argue with Apple? Why not let Apple's customers do the arguing for you? All right, we've kind of spilled over a little bit into the future of Wi-Fi, so I actually want to bring that up, because as we talk about all these protocols and things that people need to fix and all these clients and everything, like Eddie referenced it, you know, we spent 8 years going from 802.11ac Wi-Fi 5 to 802.11ax Wi-Fi 6. A lot of things happened in those 8 years. And now we're already on the cusp of Wi-Fi 7. I mean, I saw, as of the time of this recording, I saw a picture of open Wi-Fi 7, open source Wi-Fi 7 on the show floor. And my friend Jake Snyder pointed out the fact that, man, those antennas are really close together. But I've also had people going, well, maybe we don't need to adopt Wi-Fi 6E. It's a little weird, and I hear that it can crash planes, and it might cause fire trucks to burst into flames on the side of the road. no, legitimately, you should read some of the drafts that got sent to the FCC recently. So a lot of people are like, you know what, I'll just wait for Wi-Fi 7. I'll just wait for the next iPhone. I'll just wait for the next iPad. Ad infinitum, forever and forever. So when I mentioned Wi-Fi 7 to the panel, I got a whole bunch of this. I got a whole bunch of that's crap. I don't want to talk about that. That's not even here yet. It's not a thing. But yet, to hear folks like Qualcomm talk about it, it's here. We're shipping it. We're going to sell it. Somebody's going to buy it. I recorded a Conversations episode. If you want to check out more of those things, you should head over to gestaltit.com and look for Conversations. But it said you shouldn't wait for Wi-Fi 7 because it's not here yet, because it's not baked yet, because we're not even shipping Wi-Fi 6E handsets for certain manufacturers yet. Why in God's name would you wait for Wi-Fi 7? So should people wait?
For 802.11be, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's define that, Eddie, because you are the person who loves to take down those marketing things. So Wi-Fi 5 is 802.11ac. Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E are 802.11ax implemented on different frequency bands. Wi-Fi 7 is 802.11be. So should people wait?
Yeah, I mean, no, nobody should
If
wait.
you've just sold new APs to a customer, so let's say it's Wi-Fi 6 APs, and they've just rolled them out, and Wi-Fi 7 comes out next year, you think you're running back to that customer and say, well, let's rip them all out, let's do it again.
What if the customer comes to you and say, why do my APs not support this?
Well, because there's no magic wand to just go wong and then the radio's upgraded, right?
You sure about that?
Sure there is. It's unrestrained capital.
And
I'd be really, let's look at this another way. I'd be really interested in how many people here have implemented Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax APs and disabled AX functionality.
oh, 3 hands.
Today, you've got customers today with brand new AX APs acting as really good AC access points.
Why would you do that, Peter?
I've done it several times because I don't think that AX is even working right today. There's so many issues with it, and often given the lack of clients and the compatibility issues, actually you get better performance, and I can go into lots of reasons why. Actually,
Intel drivers.
APs as AC.
Well,
Some of the issues are down to the chipset algorithms that when you start to do OFDMA, which is a big feature with AX, isn't it? That actually the AP has to schedule everything, and when who can transmit when, and those scheduling algorithms are really complex, and actually it does an okay job downstream, but upstream it's really poor in my experience. I'm sure the algorithms will get better. If you look at RRM. 10 years ago, we always said to configure everything static channels, set your own and power levels, because these automatic algorithms are just terrible. They put APs next to each other on the same channels. Move on 10 years, they're actually not bad, those algorithms, and most of the time, if we tune them, we can use them. And it's the same with some of the technology we've got today. It's so new, it doesn't actually work very well. So actually, you find that sometimes we're turning it off. So my argument would be, let's get AX working first and working well, even before we talk about 6 gigahertz, which is here today and we're shipping and we're all getting excited about. Really? It's AX, a technology which in my opinion doesn't fully work well all the time. And that's the only thing you can do in a new frequency band. And then now we're starting to talk about Wi-Fi 7. Hang on a minute. It's like we're getting obsessed with the marketing when the actual technology isn't working, in my opinion, today. Not reliably, not well. I still believe for the most reliable, well-performing networks, you can use, for most people, AC is good enough today.
So
I'm going to,
Hold on, let's let Avril go, and then I know Lee wanted to jump in here, but we've got a lot of people who want to talk about this.
So I want to build on what Peter's saying. I actually don't. I believe that Wi-Fi has got overly complex. What Lee was also saying, and we keep adding these radio features to it, but it's in an unlicensed frequency band, and I fundamentally don't believe that you can do central scheduling, right? Like Peter's talking about, effectively in a band where you're suffering unknown sources of interference. How can you possibly do scheduling when you don't know what the hell's transmitting in that band? So I feel like Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7 is not fixing the problems or providing new solutions. Wi-Fi 6, I think, fundamentally is flawed. Not because of the radio. You do that in cellular, you do it in a shared frequency, you do it in a private frequency, it will work. And it does work. And we've got the algorithms that work. We can't apply those algorithms in an unlicensed frequency band, right?
Lee, did you want to jump in before I let the rest of the folks in the room here go?
No, let them have at it.
Okay, so
Thank you.
John.
So I was going to say that I'll keep it simple. I will buy whatever the flagship AP is from the manufacturer I'm currently buying APs from when it's stable, right? So in other words, you bring out your 6E AP. I'm not going to buy that just yet. I'm going to test it first. I'm going to get one. I'm going to put it in the lab. When it looks like it's stable, when I look the product manager in the face and go, do you want me to buy these yet? Because you know if I do and deploy them, if they have problems, I will be all up in your grill. And they go, please don't buy this yet. And I go, okay, fine. And then they go, no, you can buy these now. I will buy the best product available at the time because my refresh cycles are very long. If it supports 6 gigahertz, great. If it doesn't, okay. A lot of this is just a little bit out of my hands. It's the product cycles. It's what the vendors are bringing to market. I can only buy what they'll sell me. I can't keep buying, AC only APs forever.
It's kind of funny because just so everybody knows, I'm holding up an iPhone 14 Pro. And this was the iPhone that was supposed to have Wi-Fi 6E support, right? Like that was, oh my God, the number of wireless engineers that were like, it's going to have it. And then when the announcement came out and it didn't, I'm not going to buy a new one because it's missing that one critical feature. You know that the iPhone, was it the 12 or the 13? I think it was the 12 that got Wi-Fi 6 support. Do you know why it got Wi-Fi 6 support before the iPad or the MacBook? Because they could no longer source parts from their suppliers that didn't have Wi-Fi 6 radios in them. Sorry, 802.11ax. It turns out that sometimes technology marches on and you have no control over it. Oh, you want to buy those parts? eBay is an option. May?
That's what I was going to say. Supply chain.
Yeah.
Whether you implement 6E or not, supply chain. You're going to get your APs faster. At the end of the day, that's what matters to me and my clients. So.
Yeah, that's really possible. Wi-Fi 7 AP starts shipping out, and chip manufacturers are not manufacturing 6E chips, and well, the vendors and the customers will have no choice, especially if they have a refresh cycle and they have budgets like use it or lose it kind of thing. Well, I got to use my budget. Wi-Fi 7, I can get it in 2 months. Wi-Fi 6E, I can get it in 6 months. Well, Wi-Fi 7 it is in that case.
Even if you can't support the new band in it because nobody has clients that will run it, or anybody remember Draft In? I had to set one of those up for my old boss. That was a nightmare. Thanks, Belkin.
So with this whole conversation, there's really two things that I think we kind of leave by the wayside. On customers that are not the absolute largest, backhaul. I am not going to recommend that you try to have some crazy, 128 or 64 QAM in every single place in your facility if you have a 10 meg backhaul. If you have a gig backhaul, I'm not going to do it. It simply does not make sense. The only reason you would want that is because you want to keep your utilization down. Fair enough. But I think AX actually has the right idea. We don't really need more throughput right now, except in specialist applications. AD takes care of the super crazy throughputs right now. Yeah, I understand it's not your traditional chipset, but those are still specialist applications. I have yet to see someone who is trying to stream a thin client running CAD, renewing the whole file every second. It's simply not there. AR, fine. I can hear people screeching about AR and VR right now. That's fine.
So
that's reasonable.
Foster, you bring us some really important points, but according to the internet, you're wrong. And I'll tell you why you're wrong. Because the number on one of them is bigger than the number on the other, and the bigger number always wins. As evidenced by the fact that I actually measured the radios in the new M1 MacBooks, and it's 100 megabits per second slower at optimum throughput ratios. Therefore, it's worse, even if it's a Wi-Fi 6 radio that allows the client to get off the air faster for whatever reason, because bigger number better, little number bad.
So two counterpoints. One, I still actually send this to clients, Mr. McKinsey's presentation on AX versus AC throughputs. Still relevant. It should not still be relevant this much later. That was what, 2 years ago, Peter? Something like that.
Interconnections is still a valid book for layer 2 connections
And
30 years after it was written.
The other, and more important, I am the baseline for all correct opinions. So, sorry.
Well, but the thing is that we are Wi-Fi experts. Well, you guys are Wi-Fi experts debating this, and the average person doesn't buy that. I mean, let's be fair. That's why Wi-Fi 6, 6E, 6R2, and 7 exist, is because I'm not going to go into Best Buy or your favorite big box store and go, give me the one that has the most letters.
Yeah.
Well, but so the point you just made, though, is an example of the kind of the who cares mentality. Outside of this community, who was really upset when the M1 MacBooks Pros came out and they weren't 3 spatial stream? Because that's why your client's 100 megabits slower. That's why your client's slower. That was just about the only 3 spatial stream laptop that you could buy for predictably for a really long time. I was big mad, but I'm like, it's using the iPhone chipset. It's going to be a 2 spatial stream client. Look, I tell you, and it was, and I'm mad, but they still got my money, so I don't know if I was mad enough.
So other than Scott Lester, hi Scott, it was people who read specs, because bigger number better no matter what. Even if you don't do the math to figure out why the smaller number is actually better in the long run. And I think that that's the problem, and it's ultimately one of the problems we're going to face in Wi-Fi. Bigger numbers are better. We're going to deploy Wi-Fi 7, but we're going to turn off all the BE features because it isn't baked yet, because it's still draft, because it's the projected one. So we're actually just going to, as Peter said, just turn on the AX features.
You don't have to turn the features off because there's no clients anyway.
But I'm paid for something, and it either has to work or it doesn't. But Scott, you bring up an important.
You do, because they consume airtime. One of the problems I have with AX, even if I've got no clients, is it's doing all its sounding and it's just consuming airtime, which I would rather have for my clients to use. So I turn the features off, because just as everyone has said, we're making Wi-Fi more and more complex. And actually, if you look at the protocol, we're just consuming more and more airtime, doing stupid things that we don't need to do. Turn it off and let me use that airtime for my data.
So something I heard from Peter actually in one of the class we were in together, and it was a discussion on the AX and turning off the AX features, and we're talking about it. And Peter brought up a really excellent point. If AX access points, it can be a really excellent AC access point. So on a similar note, I mean, if you have Wi-Fi 7 access points, you don't have clients and all that kind of stuff, it could be possibly you turn off Wi-Fi 7. So Wi-Fi 7 AP is a really excellent AX access point. I mean, possibly.
No, absolutely. I would say I sell clients AX APs a day, and I go, look, this is a really best AC access point you can possibly buy. It's got better radios. It's got lots of more processing power, more memory. It's a better AC access point than buying an AC access point. But just use it as a really good AC access point.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Peter, because one of my hot buttons is, these things come out, they're going to be on shaky code. There's probably going to be new licenses that go with them for your licensing pleasure. And you're going to be charged as if they were Cadillacs, fully baked, absolutely finished, ready to go. You're going to pay a premium for features that you can't use. So when you talk about, the future of Wi-Fi, they're going to be over marketed. They're going to go right to the top end spec. When we hear about Wi-Fi 7, they're going to be advertised as capable of 46 gig, just ridiculous 320 meg wide channels. You're going to hear the top end of the spec the same way we've heard it for everything along the way. And the over marketing and the over hyping but paying
Internet piece.
for that is still going to continue.
We live,
Paying for things that you can't get because they don't exist, but marketing says it does.
we live in a world where vendors are doing videos with Linus Tech Tips. That's where the marketing engine is now, where Linus Tech Tips is showing off the latest enterprise AP, and I'm like, who is gonna watch this video? What's gonna happen? Someone's gonna watch the video and they're gonna ask me what I think about it. So the marketing has gotten really weird.
You know who's going to watch that video?
So one thing
People with
to that
really
point,
bad
which I think is interesting, as we've talked about the MacBook now only having 2 spatial streams. So the one free spatial stream client that we used to get has gone. So clients are all 1 and 2 spatial stream. So why even buy any AP if you don't want to pay that's more than 2 spatial streams? You know, don't buy the top up the range, buy the lowest spec one. It's an interesting question, isn't it? And if I'm
that's not.
channel my inner an Aiken or a second, who would say only buy a 2 spatial stream access point. And why do you buy the 4 spatial stream? What people say, the vendors, is it can hear better receive the sensitivity. Which is true. It can listen on all antennas. It can receive the signal better. Do we want to do that though in Wi-Fi? Because that's going to potentially create more co-channel interference. Do I want an AP to actually hear less? If I do, then maybe I'm better off just with 2 spatial streams.
Why?
I'm just throwing that idea out to see what debate it.
Go ahead.
This is 2 spatial streams per client, not the number of spatial streams that are possible, right?
Yeah.
So why are you arguing that? Why wouldn't you want less spatial streams on your
He's not arguing. He's asking.
Is that, well, that's the answer, is because you're moving towards massive MIMO, right? Multi-user MIMO, next generation will be massive MIMO. Yeah, I'm not saying it works. I'm not arguing that.
So there's a couple of scenarios there. Yes. Number one, it doesn't happen. I don't care what anybody says. They do it in the lab.
Not yet.
I've done it. I look at my customers. They have all AX and we have AX clients, and I never, you do the command to see how many MIMO events occurred, and it's like, out of the millions of events that occurred, we had 26 MIMO
You know what
events.
triggers it? Because I was talking about this to one of the vendors,
Yeah.
I won't mention their name, and I said, give me a packet capture that is using OFDMA and MIMO, multi-user MIMO at the same time. And they told, one, they couldn't demo it,
Right.
they couldn't trigger it for me, and they told me the only situation it would work was if you saw lots of little tiny packets, right? Which is IoT, it's not what we do from laptops, it's not what we do from smartphones. We do aggregated frames. Aggregated frames will not trigger multi-user MIMO.
Right.
Right?
So I hate to be triggered, but 2020 at WLPC, I taught a class on doing OFDMA packet capture.
Right.
What was the hardest part about that? Was it getting the capability of the little Jetsons to do the packet capture? No, it was figuring out how to trigger it on command. And I literally was throwing the APs all over and the clients all over the room trying to go, what is the right multipath scenario where I could get this reliably? And even then, it was still real hit or miss. And when I talked to the vendors, the answer was the same. We're all, these 2 APs from these 2 vendors are all using the same chipsets. The schedulers are black box to us. We can't tell you how to trigger it. And I'm like, it makes it hard for me to demonstrate the usefulness of this if I can't show you data with it, data without it. So
that's the first answer, right? The first answer is that it just doesn't work right now, right? And we don't know when. Hopefully, maybe when 6 gigahertz actually becomes a thing, maybe we'll see it because there's nothing else. But we don't really have a baseline yet to look at. The second reason, though, and I think Peter, knows the answer, but although he does have a valid reason why listening less might be better, but having the ability to do MRC and stuff like that, where the AP can hear and use different antenna pairs to get better, or receive from the client is a benefit as well. You can run into asymmetric, links issues, but still, that is a benefit of having more antennas. But to his point, the better the AP hears, it doesn't only hear transmissions better, it hears potential interference, right? So that preamble receive threshold is getting bigger or higher or lower, whichever way you want to look at it, if I hear better as well. So there's different ways to look at it, but that's just talking about the complexity of Wi-Fi.
I'll let Peter jump in and answer that, and then Foster has a
I
comment
have
he wants to
something
make.
too.
Yeah, I was just I can't remember what I was going to say now, but basically, I think no, that's exactly right. It is the reason for having more antennas could be multi-user MIMO, but we can get it to work today. You can actually set it up and get it to work in a lab. I've done it, but the chances of you always end up having to do a big FTP pull or speed test or something that's going to pull constant data all the time, and we just don't get that in normal situations. Client don't behave like that, and yeah, it's a valid question. I think I'm not going to say there's the correct answers, but do you want your APs to be able to hear better or less? In high density environments, we often want them to be able to hear less. In maybe environments where we're trying to get long distance communication, we want them to be able to hear more. So it's an interesting thing to think about when you do a design. Is maybe some scenarios you would be better with two spatial stream APs.
Foster?
So, bombast and jokes aside, I think, and I'm referring to myself there, I think there's two through lines that we can draw in this conversation, right? One is resource utilization. And I mean, the sort of titular utilization is probably the most important in day to day. That is what we're looking for in new things right now, generally. Even when you're moving faster, what you're looking for is more data and less utilization, right? It doesn't have to be a one-to-one trade-off as we increase our technological, let's call it sophistication, right? And the other is kind of a meta version of that, and it relates to our roles as engineers. A lot of times we want the biggest and the best and the coolest stuff just on a technological cool factor, right? The newest and shiniest, and our customers do too. But a big part of our responsibility as engineers, and moreover, people who are quote unquote experts, and I'm under the quotes, the rest of these people are legitimate experts. We have to help our customers conserve their resources, right? Because they always want the newest and shiniest with the best marketing, and that's not always the best choice. I just don't think a lot of SMB customers are best served buying a $3,500 AP that they're not going to see the gain out of. And it's relative, right?
Avril, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that would excite me about Wi-Fi 7, I'd encourage people to go to, is and I haven't read the standards recently, but the way that Wi-Fi 6 works is when you allocate a resource unit, right? Everybody's got to finish at the same time, and if it's not used, it's lost. It's inefficient, and this is why it's very inefficient protocol in 6E. If they add an ability to have a trigger frame that will allocate the same resource unit to different users at different times, then the issue with the inefficiency will go. The problem with the small packets will go, because you'll be able to intermix big packets and small packets from different users. That would be a technical reason why Wi-Fi 7, if they fix the problem with Wi-Fi 6, that would be a reason to go to Wi-Fi 7. And I'm not saying they've done that, but
Right.
that's the technical solution that we need in Wi-Fi networks. Wi-Fi 6 was a major leap, but has problems with it. We need to fix them.
Yeah, because our
Somebody
problem
needs to
is
sponsor Avril for the Wi-Fi Alliance. Who wants to pitch in? Go ahead, Eddie.
Oh yeah.
No, I was gonna say, yeah,
Okay.
so that's the issue. That's what she was saying before. The problem is we can't really, our scheduling doesn't work because it's
Yeah.
not from the infrastructure, really, and what it's trying to do, it can't really do because it's trying to do it from the infrastructure, and really it's all in Wi-Fi, it's all about the client. And then with BE, hopefully, I think it's multi-link that's going to be doing that, where you actually use different bands and different spatial streams to allot on different radios. So that's why you're able to have small packets and big packets. They're not sharing the same, I guess technically they're sharing the same transmit opportunity, but they're not sharing the same resources because they're on they can be on different bands. So you could have a transmission going on 5 and 6, but it's all somehow scheduled. I don't understand it either, but I'm just kind of going by what I've read on various IEEE and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I could see that could be something that could be very cool, because that kind of it kind of says, well, since we can't really truly manage the scheduling on the AP side, maybe this helps us alleviate some of that by able to break it across these streams and different bands and frequencies, which I think is cool. But I think to our point, we can't even do OFDMA right now. Are we going to be able to now say go across bands and different frequencies and do that? I don't know. It's like a big ask.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think we've got an unbound medium, as you said, a client's king, and it's so hard. It's easy when you look at these technologies to they promise a lot. So I remember with AX, one thing people said, well, it's going to make it not faster, more efficient. And one example that I had many people give before that we actually got the technology was, let's say you've got a voice phone and it's G711, it encodes 20 milliseconds of voice every packet. So you've got to send the packet every 20 milliseconds. If I can give that voice phone a resource unit dedicated to that voice phone, it can always transmit. And then we can use the rest of the channel for data and other things. That makes sense. That would work. That would be more efficient. That would make voice work better. There's no way of doing that with AX. You can say, I want to give my voice client this result. It's done. The scheduling's taken out of our hands. It's done at the chipset level. It's done by magic. There's no way of doing what was promised. And so I think if we're going to start talking about Wi-Fi 7, we're just going to have to wait and see what it actually allows us to do in theory, because you get a lot of things where people, just like that people sort of promise, hey, this technology will be able to do this, but when it comes to it, it can do it.
Mark, and then Eddie, and then we're going to wrap.
It's really cellular and Wi-Fi are starting to take the best of each world coming together. That's exactly what we're doing. Cellular has the scheduling. They tried it with AX, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Let's bring in the FDD, frequency division duplexing. Try that route with multiple 2.4, 5 gigahertz broadcasting at the same time. It's the same concept. They're just attempting to bring in cellular or Wi-Fi into the same.
But the difference is one is the infrastructure managed and the other one is really client managed,
it is.
right? We're trying to give the infrastructure a little bit, but really in the end it's the client. So that's where we always fall back compared to cellular that owns those frequencies, right? But one thing that I have not seen in use and really haven't seen it work yet, that I think it would be a greater benefit to Wi-Fi than OFDMA is BSS coloring. I haven't seen that anywhere. If we could say it doesn't matter that we have 5 APs on channel 48 because they're all on different colors and we have 5 simultaneous transmissions, that's just as good as having an OFDMA transmission. Actually better, because I've never seen more than 3 actual RUs being used, from any test that I've seen anybody do. That's the most. We supposedly can go to 9, but 3 is the most I've ever seen. If you have multiple APs in the same channel on different colors, I forgot what the limit is, 6 or 7 or something. That's better than anything we've seen. So I don't know why BSS coloring hasn't been more of a push with AX.
So I'm going to jump in here because I think I know the answer, and we've already just argued ourselves back into a full circle.
Oh,
it's
perfect.
Because clients don't support it right now, and they may not ever support it. And just like trying to use Twitter polls anywhere other than the website, what happens when that poll doesn't decompose properly to other people? The answer is it looks broken.
Well, again, but the thing is, the why. I mean, we know why, because the clients sort of don't support it. It's not going to happen. But it isn't like the actual physical mechanical reason why. Yeah, the why that I want to know is why aren't they supporting it? Because that should be, to me, from the beginning, that was the thing I wanted to see. OFDMA was nice, but BSS coloring to me was the thing that was like, if we could do that, we're going to fix so many problems.
So I'll tell you where you can find the answer, Eddie. Mobility Field Day. We do this twice a year, and this is an opportunity for all of the people here and the ones watching us online to say things like, why don't you support this? What is the technical reason why you won't implement this and let clients use it? And believe it or not, I just had a conversation with one of our presenters not an hour ago where they said, we come here because we get real world feedback. And that's one of the things that's so valuable to the people who participate on this side of the fence, up here where the presenters are, is that you're hearing this real world feedback. You're getting the sage wisdom of people like Peter McKenzie and Lee Badman and all of our other delegates saying, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like the spec sheet, and I can prove that it doesn't. I have PCAPs, because I have PCAPs. It did happen. So that's why we want to continue to bring more great conversations like this to Mobility Field Day, not just the roundtables, but having our delegates here to be able to push back, to offer guidance to people who are just in a lab making things work, sort of, and then saying, no, 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 you need to fix your code quality and you need to implement this in hardware. And why are you not putting this in the next version of the standard? And that's what we're going to continue to do over and over again until finally it sinks in. Boy, I have a very optimistic outlook on the way that IT works, because we all know that in the end, as we said, bigger number, better. And if you can give it to me cheaper, even better than that.
But Tom, where can we find out more about this technology field day you speak of?
So you can go to techfieldday.com, just like you can go to find all of the videos. And you can also check us out on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday, because we have, well, over a decade worth of videos there right now of all kinds of fun things. Like, you know, the very first time anybody ever got to see 802.11n in person. We got some of that. We got to see a lot of other really cool stuff. Just go watch Victor Strom's discussion about Wi-Fi antennas from Wireless Field Day 2 back in 2011. It still cooks my brain.